January 27, 1973. The Vietnam War was over. The Paris Peace Accords had been formally ratified. The agreement stated that there would be no more American involvement in Vietnam, but that's only part of the story. As troops began to head home and reunite with their families, the U.S. government was still involved with running clandestine missions within the country. An Air Force EC-47, tail number 43-48636, callsign Baron 52, carrying 8 crew members, was on one such mission, but they would be shot down over Laos only a week after the signing. But what came next would set off a mystery that some say still remains unsolved. This is the case of the missing crew members of Baron 52. The Paris Peace Accords were signed, but before the ink had time to dry, the U.S. Air Force sent an EC-47 electronic warfare aircraft on a nighttime radio direction finding mission to monitor the Ho Chi Minh Trail in an attempt to locate North Vietnamese tanks moving south. The mission itself was in direct violation of the peace agreement, and the crew knew it. In fact, Sergeant Peter Cressman, an electronics expert who flew a number of top-secret reconnaissance missions, and who would just days later fly on Baron 52, wrote an angry letter to his congressman, stating that he and several members of his unit, the 361st Tactical Electronic Warfare Squadron at Ubon Air Force Base, Thailand, were being ordered to run missions despite American involvement in the war being over. Cressman also stated that he wanted to refuse these orders that were in his mind not only illegal but immoral, but feared the consequences. Sergeant Cressman and 7 other Air Force personnel, Captain George Spitz, Captain Arthur Bollinger, First Lieutenant Robert Bernhardt, Second Lieutenant Several Prim, Staff Sergeant Todd Melton, Sergeant Joseph Matajov, and Sergeant Dale Brandenburg, would board Baron 52 for their mission, and they took off from Ubon Air Force Base at 11:05 p.m. on February 4, 1973. The flight itself went according to plan until about 2 hours after takeoff at approximately 1:25 a.m. on February 5th, when the plane began taking 37mm anti-aircraft fire. Radio contact was lost at 1:40 a.m., and the plane was shot down in the Laotian jungle, about 20 miles from the border with South Vietnam. The location of the downed aircraft was roughly 8 miles away from 3 major roads in the area, all of which led into North Vietnamese-held territory. It would take 2 days for the wreckage to be located by Air Force Search and Rescue in Salavan Province, Laos. The plane was found laying upside down on the side of a mountain, surrounded by triple canopy jungle. A special rescue team made up of 3 Air Force para-rescuemen and an intelligence expert managed to get into the site on February 7th and discovered 3 bodies in the cockpit, presumably those of the pilot, Captain Spitz, the co-pilot, Second Lieutenant Prim, and the navigator, Captain Bollinger, still buckled into their seats, burned nearly beyond recognition. They appeared to have died on impact. The team also discovered another body, that of third pilot, First Lieutenant Bernhardt, outside of the wreckage. But in the rear of the plane is where the controversy started. The rear jump door of the plane was gone and has never been located. The bodies of the 4 electronics experts stationed in the rear of the plane were missing and never found. Their safety belts had been unbuckled, and all of the top-secret reconnaissance equipment they had on board was missing. Also missing were the rear crew's parachutes, and this is where the controversy would begin. The mother of one of the servicemen on Baron 52 recalled the day that she and her husband were notified of the crash. She said that 2 men from the military told them that their son's plane was shot down, and that her son was classified as missing in action, possibly bailing out with several others before the crash. However, 18 days later, the military representatives returned and said that there was no chance of a bailout or of any survivors because of how the plane had crashed. Sergeant Cressman's mother initially accepted that her son was killed in action, but her position would change after receiving her son's belongings. Among his personal effects, Cressman's mother discovered the letter to their congressman about the illegality of the missions taking place. Cressman's parents also questioned the official ruling when they discovered that several parachutes were missing, suggesting that several men escaped the plane before it crashed. In 1978, 5 years later, Sergeant Cressman's parents received a phone call from an attorney representing a national MIA organization. He claimed that he had seen evidence that suggested that at least 4 members of Baron 52 had survived the crash and had been taken prisoner by the North Vietnamese. Jack Anderson, an investigative journalist, uncovered a number of reports, including intelligence briefings from around the time of the incident. On the morning of February 5, 1973, a U.S. intelligence listening post at Phu Bai, South Vietnam, intercepted an enemy communication indicating that they were holding 4 pilots captive. Another report from February 5th read, "The people involved in the South Laotian campaign have shot down 1 aircraft and captured the pilots." These were not isolated incidents, as for the next several months, different listening posts around the country captured communications pertaining to these captured airmen. Another listening post made a report about an intercepted communication from the Pathet Lao, the communist forces operating inside Laos, that spoke of transporting 4 air pirates captured the day Baron 52 was shot down. Official records indicate that Baron 52 was the only aircraft shot down on February 5, 1973. In the days following the crash, congressional documents show a 6994th Security Squadron communique that read, "Believe crew members could have bailed out and possibly been carried north by the winds." A message to Washington from the Air Force headquarters in Thailand read, "There is a chance that crew members bailed out and landed safely on the ground. There is not conclusive evidence of death." On May 24, 1973, an internal memo from the Assistant Secretary of Defense, Dr. Roger Shields, read, "DIA feels there is some reason to believe that the 4 may actually have been captured." Later, a Laotian operative secretly working for the U.S. reported that they witnessed a transport of 4 clean-shaven American prisoners along one of the roads leading to the crash site the day after the crash. All of these reports were sent to the Defense Intelligence Agency at Fort Meade, Maryland, as well as the White House, and kept classified by the U.S. government, until journalist Jack Anderson broke the story on Good Morning America in 1978, saying, "A Pentagon spokesman now agrees there's a good chance that these 4 men survived the crash, yet they deliberately gave the families misinformation." In 1973, Terrell Manarson, working for the NSA, held a position that involved deciphering intercepted North Vietnamese messages. During his time in country, he discovered communications between the North Vietnamese who were requesting transport for captured American pilots. Manarson believed that the men were the survivors of Baron 52. He holds to the belief that the men were captured after parachuting out before the crash. Sergeant Madajov's family went to the Pentagon to seek answers, and after looking at their son's service file, found copies of various radio intercepts. And while much of the information in these intercepts was blacked out, they felt they had found enough information to suggest that the U.S. government knew that some men from Baron 52 had survived and had been captured. Later, the Defense Intelligence Agency admitted that the communications existed, but noted that the nationality of the captured pilots was never specified, and that they did not believe that they were the Baron 52 crew. And in 1986, another intelligence analyst, Jerry Mooney, testified before Congress and stated that 4 members of Baron 52 were in fact prisoners of war and had been moved to the former Soviet Union, or as he says it, Moscow bound. During the Senate Select Committee on POW MIA Affairs hearings of 1992, a representative of the DIA testified that it was the government's position that the communique reports were unrelated to Baron 52. Family members of the missing airmen believe that the government covered up the incident because it happened after the signing of the Paris Peace Accords, and its revelation could have potentially led to a restart of the war. In 1992, a task force was sent to the crash site to excavate and recover any evidence. A dog tag with Sergeant Madajov's name on it was found lying in plain sight outside the wreckage. The team recovered 23 bone fragments and half of a tooth. Ellis Kellery, who is responsible for the identification of the remains and is a pioneer in the field of forensic anthropology, said that the bone fragments cannot be proven conclusively to be human. He was suddenly replaced by an army dentist with little forensic experience who would state the bone fragments and teeth were in fact those of all 4 of the missing men. The military felt that these results confirmed their original findings. The families of the crew all requested DNA analysis of the bone fragments and tooth, but all of these requests were denied by the U.S. government. On March 27, 1996, the bone fragments and tooth recovered from the crash site were laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery in a group burial. The families of the 4 missing men each attended to honor the sacrifice of the flight crew, but none believed that the bone fragments were those of Melton, Madajov, Cressman, or Brandenburg. Since then, Sergeant Madajov's brother John has sought assistance from his representatives and senators in petitioning the Pentagon for further information, as well as appealing to then-President Obama. Former Assistant Secretary of Defense Dr. Roger Shields said that the government, quote, acted precipitously to declare Madajov and the other 3 missing crew members to be dead, unquote. Congress reviewed the crash and the status of the 4 missing crewmen again in 2016, but declined to change their status back to missing in action. Today, the families of Staff Sergeant Todd Melton, Sergeant Peter Cressman, Sergeant Joseph Madajov, and Sergeant Dale Brandenburg are still searching for answers to the actual whereabouts of their loved ones. As of September 2020, the entire crew is listed by the Defense POW/MIA Accounting Agency as accounted for. So what do you think really happened on February 5, 1973? Were the 4 enlisted electronics experts in the back of the plane able to jump out before the crash? All of their safety belts were unbuckled, the parachutes were unaccounted for, and the rear jump door as well as the top secret equipment on board have never been found. Were they captured and sent to the Soviet Union as Jerry Mooney claims? Being Air Force electronics experts, these men, if taken alive, would have been highly valuable to the Soviets. Or did they perish with the rest of the crew on that Laotian mountainside? Let us know what you think in the comments below. So, that's going to do it for this episode of the Shelldrake Files. As always, if you like this kind of content, hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our content uploads. So, from all of us here at the Shelldrake Files, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.